At my son's funeral, I received a strange message. I'm alive. Don't trust anyone. Mom didn't die of natural causes. The message came from his number. 2 weeks later, the police raided my daughter-in-law's house, and what they discovered. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. The rain had stopped, but the cemetery ground remained muddy beneath my dress shoes. I stood there watching as they lowered my son Marcus into the earth, my throat tight with unshed tears. 57 years old, and I'd never imagined I'd bury my own child. The preacher's words blurred together as I stared at the mahogany casket, trying to make sense of how a healthy 32-year-old man could just die in a car accident. "Dad, are you okay?" Sarah, my daughter-in-law, placed her hand on my arm. Her touch felt cold even through my suit jacket. She looked appropriately grief-stricken in her black dress, mascara slightly smudged, but something about her demeanor bothered me. Maybe it was the way she kept checking her phone, or how she'd handled all the funeral arrangements without asking my input. I'd chalked it up to her way of coping with grief, but now I wondered. "I'm fine," I lied, forcing a weak smile, just trying to process all this. The twins, Emma and Jake, stood close to their mother, both 9 years old and barely understanding why Daddy wasn't coming home. Emma kept asking when we could visit him again, and Jake hadn't spoken since the accident 3 days ago. Looking at them made my chest ache even more. They needed stability now, not an old man drowning in his own sorrow. As the service concluded and people began to disperse, offering their condolences and empty promises to call if you need anything, I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. I almost ignored it. Who would text during a funeral? But something made me pull it out discreetly. The message sender showed Marcus's name. My blood turned to ice. "Dad, I'm alive. Don't trust anyone. Mom didn't die of natural causes." My hand started trembling so violently I nearly dropped the phone. I looked around frantically, expecting to see someone playing a cruel joke, but everyone was focused on leaving or talking in hushed tones. Sarah was accepting sympathy from neighbors, the perfect grieving widow. I read the message again, my heart hammering against my ribs. Mom didn't die of natural causes. Helen, my wife of 35 years, had passed away 2 years ago after what the doctors called a sudden heart condition. She'd been taking medication for months before she died, getting weaker and more confused. Sarah had been so helpful during that time, driving Helen to doctor appointments, managing her medications, staying overnight when Helen had bad episodes. "Albert, you look pale. Are you having chest pains?" Dr. Morrison, our family physician for 20 years, appeared beside me with genuine concern. "This kind of stress can trigger cardiac events in men your age." I'm fine," I managed, quickly shoving the phone back into my pocket, just overwhelmed. But I wasn't fine. Nothing was fine. Dead people don't send text messages. Yet there it was, sitting in my phone like a digital ghost, using words that sounded exactly like something Marcus would say. He'd always been protective of his mother, even after she died. He'd questioned some of the medical decisions, wondered why Helen had declined so rapidly when she'd been relatively healthy just months before. "Grandpa Albert, can we go home now?" Emma tugged at my jacket, her small face streaked with tears. "I don't like this place." I knelt down to her level, trying to compose myself. "Of course, sweetheart. We can go home." Sarah approached us, keys jingling in her hand. "I'll drive you back to your place, Albert. You shouldn't be alone today." There was something in her tone, an insistence that made me uncomfortable. Since Marcus died, she'd been almost hovering, bringing meals I didn't ask for, offering to handle paperwork, suggesting I might want to downsize to a smaller place now that I was alone. At the time, I'd thought she was being considerate. Now, with that message burning in my pocket, her attention felt suffocating. "That's thoughtful, but I'll be fine driving myself," I said, standing up. "You need to get the kids home and settled." "Nonsense. You're in no condition to drive. Besides, we need to discuss some practical matters about Marcus's affairs." The way she said "practical matters" sent a chill down my spine. I thought about Helen's final weeks, how Sarah had suddenly become the go-between for all medical information. She'd explain Helen's condition to me in simplified terms, like I was too old or stupid to understand. She'd accompanied Helen to every appointment, claiming my presence would stress her out. "What kind of practical matters?" I asked carefully. Sarah glanced around, making sure the twins were out of earshot. They were picking flowers from a nearby grave, innocent and oblivious to adult conversations. Well, the house for one thing. Marcus had been making payments on it, but now she trailed off meaningfully, and there are some insurance policies we need to discuss. Financial responsibilities. Helen had said something similar in her last days, when she was lucid enough to talk. She'd grabbed my hand with surprising strength and whispered, "Don't let her handle the money, Albert. Promise me." I'd thought it was the medication talking, making her paranoid and confused. Sarah had been right there, adjusting Helen's pillows and giving me that sympathetic look that said, "She doesn't know what she's saying anymore." My phone buzzed again. With shaking fingers, I pulled it out, angling it away from Sarah's view. The medication Mom was taking. Check the bottles. Sarah threw them away right after the funeral. Why? This time I couldn't hide my reaction. A strangled noise escaped my throat, and I had to grab the nearby headstone for support. Sarah was beside me instantly, her hand on my back. "Albert, what's wrong? You're scaring me." I looked into her face, studying it carefully for the first time in years. She looked concerned, but there was something else underneath. Something calculating. How had I never noticed that before? I need some air," I said weakly. "Maybe I should go home and rest." "Of course. I'll drive you. The twins can ride with us." As we walked toward the cars, I caught my reflection in a car window. I looked like a broken old man, which is exactly what I'd been for the past 2 years. After Helen died, I'd let Sarah handle everything. She'd been so efficient, so caring. She'd made sure I ate, helped me sort through Helen's belongings, even suggested I might be happier in a retirement community where I'd have more support. But now, with those messages haunting me, I wondered if her helpfulness had been something else entirely. Control, maybe, or worse. The drive to my house felt eternal. Sarah chatted pleasantly about funeral details and how well everything had gone, while the twins dozed in the back seat. I nodded and made appropriate responses, but my mind was reeling. When we pulled into my driveway, I noticed she parked in the same spot Helen used to use, right next to the kitchen window. "I'll make you some tea," Sarah said, following me inside without invitation. "You need to keep your strength up." As she bustled around my kitchen, opening cabinets like she owned the place, I excused myself to the bathroom. Once the door was locked behind me, I pulled out my phone with trembling hands. The messages were still there, impossible and real. I typed back hesitantly, "Who is this?" The response came immediately. "You know who this is. Check Mom's medicine cabinet. Look for the bottles Sarah said were expired." 3 days after the funeral, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Helen's face during those final weeks. Confused, frightened, trying to tell me something I was too blind to understand. The messages had stopped coming, but they'd planted seeds of doubt that were growing into something darker. I sat at my kitchen table at 4 in the morning, surrounded by boxes I'd finally worked up the courage to retrieve from the garage. Sarah had packed Helen's belongings so efficiently after she died, insisting it would help me move forward. I'd let her, grateful for her initiative when I was too broken to function. Now I wondered what she'd wanted hidden. The first box contained Helen's clothes, still smelling faintly of her perfume. Underneath her favorite sweater, I found something that made my heart skip. A small notebook I'd never seen before. Helen's careful handwriting covered the pages, dates spanning her last 6 months alive. March 15th, feeling dizzy again after taking the new pills. Asked Sarah about them, but she says Dr. Morrison prescribed them. Can't remember him mentioning a change. March 22nd, Albert seems worried about me. I want to tell him something feels wrong, but Sarah says I'm just anxious about aging. Maybe she's right. April 3rd, tried to call Dr. Morrison's office myself, but Sarah says I already have an appointment next week. I don't remember making one. My hands shook as I read. Helen had been documenting her symptoms, her confusion, her growing sense that something wasn't right. How had I missed this? How had I not seen what was happening right in front of me? The entries became more erratic as the weeks passed, Helen's usually neat handwriting becoming shaky and uncertain. But the last entry, dated just 3 days before she died, was written in clear, desperate letters. "Albert will never read this, but I need to write it down. I think Sarah is giving me the wrong medicine. The pills don't look like what Dr. Morrison showed me. When I asked her about it, she said I was getting confused, that they'd changed the color, but they were the same medication. But I found the old bottle in the trash. They're completely different." I tried to tell Albert, but Sarah was right there, and she gave me that look that says I'm losing my mind. Maybe I am. But what if I'm not? I had to put the notebook down and walk to the sink, my stomach churning with nausea. Helen had known something was wrong, and I dismissed her concerns as the ramblings of a sick woman. Sarah had been there for every conversation, translating Helen's confusion into medical explanations I could understand. My phone rang, making me jump. Sarah's name appeared on the screen. It was barely dawn. Why was she calling so early? Albert, I hope I didn't wake you, but I couldn't sleep. I keep thinking about Marcus and how he'd want us to take care of each other. Her voice sounded tired but caring. I was wondering if you'd like me to come by later and help you sort through some of his things. That's very thoughtful, Sarah, but I think I need some time alone with his belongings. There was a pause. Of course, I understand. But there are some documents he kept at the house that might be important. Insurance papers, that sort of thing. I could bring them by this afternoon. Documents. Insurance papers. Helen had left a substantial life insurance policy that I'd never thought to question. Sarah had handled all the paperwork, explained the process, made sure I received the payout without any hassle. Now I wondered what else she'd handled for me. Actually, Sarah, I was wondering about Helen's medication from before she passed. Do you remember what happened to those pill bottles? Another pause, longer this time. Oh, Albert, you know I threw those away right after the funeral. They were expired, and I thought it would be painful for you to have them around. Why do you ask? I found some of her notes, and she seemed confused about her medication toward the end. Poor Helen. Sarah's voice softened with what sounded like genuine sympathy. The doctor said confusion was common with her condition. She was getting so forgetful, mixing up her pills, taking them at the wrong times. That's why I started managing her medication for her. I was worried she'd accidentally take too much, or not enough. Her explanation sounded reasonable, caring even, but it directly contradicted what Helen had written in her notebook. Helen claimed the pills themselves were different, not that she was confused about taking them. After hanging up, I spent the morning going through more of Helen's belongings. In a jewelry box, I found something that made my blood run cold, a small plastic bag containing 3 pills I didn't recognize. They were blue and oblong, completely different from the heart medication Dr. Morrison had originally prescribed. Helen must have saved them, maybe as proof that something wasn't right. I called Dr. Morrison's office as soon as they opened. Mr. Thompson. Of course I remember Helen. Such a sweet woman. What can I help you with? Dr. Morrison. I'm trying to understand Helen's medication during her final months. There seems to be some confusion about what she was actually taking. Well, let me pull up her file. I heard typing in the background. That's odd. According to my records, Helen missed her last 3 scheduled appointments. I remember being concerned because she'd been doing so well on the new treatment plan. My mouth went dry. She missed appointments? But Sarah said she was bringing Helen in regularly. Sarah? I'm sorry, who is Sarah? My daughter-in-law. She said she was managing Helen's care, bringing her to appointments. More typing. Mr. Thompson, I don't show any record of a Sarah being involved in Helen's care. In fact, the last time I saw Helen was 4 months before she passed away. She seemed stable then, responding well to medication. I tried calling when she missed her appointments, but never got a response. The room began to spin around me. 4 months. Sarah had been telling me for 4 months that she was taking Helen to doctor visits that never happened. She'd been coming home with updates about Helen's condition, prescription changes, treatment adjustments, all complete fabrications. Doctor, would you be able to identify some pills for me? I found some that might have been Helen's, but I don't recognize them. Certainly. Can you bring them in this afternoon? After making the appointment, I sat in my living room staring at those 3 blue pills. Helen had hidden them for a reason. She'd documented her suspicions in a notebook that Sarah never knew existed. And now Marcus was dead, just months after he'd started asking questions about his mother's final days. I remembered a conversation from about 6 months ago. Marcus had stopped by unexpectedly and found Helen having what Sarah called a bad episode. Helen had been agitated, claiming someone was trying to hurt her, grabbing my arm and begging me not to leave her alone. Sarah had calmly explained that these paranoid episodes were part of Helen's declining condition, that the medication sometimes caused confusion and fear. But what if Helen hadn't been confused? What if she'd been terrified because she knew exactly what was happening to her? Marcus had pulled me aside that day and asked quietly, Dad, are you sure about Sarah handling all of Mom's medical care? Maybe we should get a second opinion, or at least be more involved in her treatment. I'd brushed off his concerns, told him Sarah was a godsend, that I couldn't manage Helen's complex medical needs without her help. Marcus had looked troubled but hadn't pressed the issue. He'd trusted me to make the right decisions about his mother's care. Now he was dead, and I was sitting alone with evidence that my wife might have been murdered. The pills felt heavier than they should in my palm as I prepared to leave for Dr. Morrison's office. If these weren't Helen's prescribed medication, then what were they? And more importantly, who had been giving them to her, and why? As I locked the front door, I noticed Sarah's car parked across the street. She was just sitting there, watching my house. When she saw me looking, she waved and rolled down her window. "Albert!" Perfect timing. I was just about to knock. "I brought those documents I mentioned, plus some of Helen's medical records I thought you might want." Medical records. After 2 years, she was suddenly offering me Helen's medical records. The same records she'd always insisted were too complicated for me to understand. Dr. Morrison's face went pale when he examined the pills under his desk lamp. He'd been my family's doctor for over 2 decades, delivered both my children, held my hand through Helen's cancer scare 15 years ago. I'd never seen him look so disturbed. "Albert, these aren't heart medication. They're not even close." He set the pills down carefully, like they might explode. "This appears to be a combination of sedatives and something else I can't identify without proper testing. Where exactly did you find these?" My throat felt like sandpaper. "Hidden in Helen's jewelry box. She must have saved them for some reason. If Helen was taking these instead of her prescribed heart medication..." He trailed off, shaking his head. "Albert, this could have caused exactly the symptoms she experienced before she died. Confusion, weakness, heart irregularities. Her body was essentially being poisoned while her actual condition went untreated." The word poisoned hit me like a physical blow. I gripped the arms of my chair to keep from falling over. But Sarah said Helen was taking her prescribed medication. She managed everything, brought Helen to appointments. "Albert, I need to tell you something else." Dr. Morrison leaned forward, his expression grave. "After Helen died, your son Marcus came to see me. He had questions about her treatment, wanted copies of her medical records. I gave them to him, of course. He seemed troubled by what he found." "Troubled how?" "He noticed the same discrepancies you're discovering now. The missed appointments, the fact that I hadn't seen Helen in months before she died, the medications that didn't match what I'd prescribed. Marcus was quite upset when he left here. He said he was going to get to the bottom of what happened to his mother." My hands started shaking again. Marcus had known. He'd figured out what I was just now understanding, and he'd died before he could expose it. The car accident that killed him. How convenient that it happened just as he was investigating Helen's death. Did Marcus say anything else? Did he mention Sarah specifically? Dr. Morrison hesitated. "He asked me not to mention his visit to anyone in the family. Said he needed to gather more evidence before making any accusations. But he did ask me about the legality of someone impersonating a patient's caregiver to obtain medications." I felt sick. Marcus had been building a case against Sarah, and somehow she'd found out. The messages on my phone suddenly made more sense. Maybe Marcus had set up some kind of delayed delivery system before he died. Insurance in case something happened to him. "Doctor, I need you to document everything we've discussed today. And I need to know, is there any way to test these pills to find out exactly what they are?" "Absolutely. I'll send them to the lab immediately. Albert, if what we're suspecting is true, you need to contact the police." The drive home felt surreal. I kept thinking about Marcus's last few weeks, how he'd seemed distracted and worried. He'd started coming by the house more often, asking casual questions about Helen's final days, about Sarah's involvement in her care. I'd thought he was finally processing his grief, working through his guilt about not being more involved when his mother was dying. Instead, he'd been investigating a murder. When I pulled into my driveway, Sarah's car was still there. She was sitting on my front porch with the twins, apparently waiting for me to return. Emma ran to me as I got out of the car, wrapping her small arms around my waist. "Grandpa Albert, Mommy brought cookies and she says we can have a picnic in your backyard." I forced a smile, ruffling her hair while studying Sarah's face. She looked perfectly normal. Concerned, caring, maybe a little tired from dealing with funeral arrangements and grieving children. If I hadn't just learned what I'd learned, I would have been grateful for her thoughtfulness. "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart. Why don't you and Jake go pick some flowers for the picnic table?" As the twins scampered off toward Helen's old rose garden, Sarah approached me with a sympathetic expression. "You look upset, Albert. Is everything okay?" You were gone longer than expected, just running some errands, taking care of some loose ends. I kept my voice carefully neutral. You mentioned you had some documents for me. Yes, of course. She reached into her purse and pulled out a manila envelope. These are some of Marcus's insurance papers, and I found some of Helen's old medical records that might be important for closure. Medical records, the same records that Dr. Morrison said would show months of missed appointments and medications that were never prescribed. Was she actually going to hand me evidence of her own crimes? That's very thoughtful, Sarah. I've been wondering about Helen's final treatment. It all happened so fast, and I was so overwhelmed. Oh, Albert. She reached out and touched my arm gently. You did everything you could. Helen's condition was so complicated, and you were dealing with your own health issues at the time. That's why it was so important that I stepped in to help coordinate her care. Her touch made my skin crawl, but I forced myself not to pull away. I'm just grateful you were there. I don't know what we would have done without you. She smiled, and for a moment it looked genuine. Helen was like a mother to me. I couldn't bear to see her suffer or to watch you struggle with something so difficult. Managing her medications, making sure she got to her appointments, interpreting what the doctors were saying, it was the least I could do. Every word was a lie delivered with perfect sincerity. This woman had systematically poisoned my wife while convincing me she was providing loving care. She'd isolated Helen from her actual medical team, fed her dangerous substances, and watched her deteriorate day by day. And when Marcus got too close to the truth, she'd found a way to silence him too. Sarah, can I ask you something? The night Helen died, you were there with her, weren't you? Of course. I'd been staying overnight whenever she had bad episodes, remember? You were so exhausted, and I was worried about leaving her alone. She paused, her expression growing sad. She seemed peaceful at the end. I think she knew it was time. Peaceful. Helen's final hours, according to Sarah, had been peaceful, but what if they hadn't been? What if Helen had realized what was happening to her, tried to fight back, tried to call for help? What if her last moments had been filled with terror and betrayal? The twins are having such a good time, Sarah continued, watching Emma and Jake chase butterflies among the roses. It's important for them to feel connected to family right now. They're going to need stability, routine. Marcus would have wanted that. There was something in her tone when she mentioned Marcus, a subtle emphasis that sounded almost like a warning. Was she reminding me that the twins needed their mother, that losing Sarah would be devastating for them? They're lucky to have you, I said carefully. You've been such a strong support through all of this. We're family, Albert. That's what family does. She smiled again, but this time I caught something cold in her eyes. Though I have to say I'm a little worried about you. You seem different since the funeral. More agitated. Are you sleeping okay? Maybe you should see Dr. Morrison about something to help with the stress. The suggestion made my blood run cold. Was she already planning her next move? First Helen, then Marcus, and now me. How long had she been thinking about this, planning each step? I'm managing, I said. Grief affects everyone differently. Of course. But isolation isn't healthy. Especially at our age. Maybe you should consider that retirement community we talked about. Someplace where there are people around, activities, medical support if you need it. Medical support. Under Sarah's supervision, no doubt. A place where an elderly man's declining health wouldn't raise suspicions, where medications could be easily manipulated, where a grieving widower might slowly fade away from natural causes. That evening, after Sarah and the twins left, I sat in my kitchen reading through the documents she'd given me. The medical records were expertly forged. They showed regular appointments that never happened, medication adjustments that were never made, progress notes in handwriting that looked similar to Dr. Morrison's but wasn't quite right. She'd created an entire false medical history for Helen, complete documentation of a treatment plan that existed only on paper. If anyone had questioned Helen's death, these records would have supported the story of a woman with a serious heart condition who died despite receiving excellent care. But Marcus had gotten the real records from Dr. Morrison. He'd compared them to these fabricated ones and seen the discrepancies immediately. That's when he'd started digging deeper, asking more questions, getting closer to the truth. My phone buzzed with another message. Check the garage, behind the paint cans on the left side. I hid something there before I died. This time, I didn't hesitate. I grabbed a flashlight and headed out to the garage, my heart pounding with anticipation and dread. Behind the paint cans, exactly where the message described, I found a small metal box hidden under an old tarp. Inside was a digital recorder and a stack of photographs. My hands shook as I pressed play on the recorder and heard Marcus's voice, strained and angry. "This is Marcus Thompson, recording on March 15th. I've been investigating my mother's death for 3 weeks now, and I'm convinced she was murdered. Sarah has been lying about everything, the doctor visits, the medications, all of it. I have proof that Mom never received the treatments Sarah claimed she was getting, and I found evidence that she was being given drugs that weren't prescribed by any doctor." The recording continued for 20 minutes, Marcus methodically laying out his evidence, his growing suspicions, his plans to confront Sarah with what he'd discovered. The photograph showed Helen in her final weeks, looking confused and frightened, along with pictures of pill bottles that didn't match any prescriptions. The final entry on the recording, dated just 2 days before Marcus died, sent chills down my spine. Sarah knows I'm investigating. She's been asking subtle questions about what I'm doing, where I'm going, who I'm talking to. I think she's planning something. If anything happens to me, if I have another accident like Mom's supposed heart failure, I want there to be a record of what I discovered. Dad deserves to know the truth, even if it destroys our family. The recording continued playing in the dark garage, Marcus's voice growing more urgent with each entry. As I listened, a horrifying picture emerged of systematic manipulation that had been going on far longer than I'd realized. February 8th. I've been thinking about when Sarah really entered our lives. She didn't just marry me for love, she targeted our family. I found out she researched us for months before we met. She knew about Mom's previous heart condition, Dad's retirement savings, the life insurance policies. This wasn't random. My legs gave out, and I had to sit down on an old paint bucket. Sarah hadn't fallen in love with Marcus at that community college where they'd met. She'd hunted him, studied our family like a predator choosing prey. February 12th. I confronted Sarah about missing one of Mom's doctor appointments she claimed to attend. She had an answer ready, said the appointment was rescheduled, but she forgot to mention it. But her story didn't match what Dr. Morrison's office told me. She's been lying for so long, she has backup lies prepared for everything. The photos Marcus had hidden showed Sarah in our house during Helen's final weeks. In one image, she was standing over Helen's bedside table, holding a pill bottle I didn't recognize. Helen was asleep in the background, looking pale and fragile. In another photo, Sarah was going through Helen's purse when she thought no one was watching. February 20th. I found out Sarah has access to Mom's bank accounts. She convinced Dad to add her as a backup signer in case of emergencies. She's been making small withdrawals, nothing large enough to raise suspicions, but it adds up. She's been stealing from them while slowly killing Mom. Bank accounts. I'd completely forgotten about that. Sarah had been so helpful after Helen started getting confused about finances, offering to help manage bills and medical expenses. I'd gratefully signed the paperwork, relieved to have one less thing to worry about. How much money had she taken over the months? How long had she been planning this? March 1st. The worst part is watching Dad trust her completely. She's isolated him from making any medical decisions, convinced him that he's too emotional and stressed to handle the complexity of Mom's condition. She's made herself indispensable while erasing everyone else from Mom's care. Dad doesn't even realize he's not allowed in the room during Mom's treatments. The memories came flooding back. How many times had Sarah gently suggested I wait in the living room while she helped Helen with her medication? How often had she explained that Helen was having a difficult day and didn't want visitors, even from her own husband? I'd thought she was protecting Helen's dignity during her illness. Instead, she'd been hiding evidence of what she was doing. March 10th. I think Sarah is getting ready to end Mom's life soon. She's been talking about how much Mom is suffering, how peaceful it would be if she could just let go. She's preparing Dad emotionally for Mom's death while positioning herself as the compassionate caregiver who made Mom's final days bearable. It's sick. The final photos in the stack showed Sarah's true face, images Marcus must have taken secretly, catching her in unguarded moments. In one, she was smiling coldly while looking through Helen's jewelry box. In another, she was on the phone, her expression calculating and predatory. These weren't the loving, concerned looks she'd shown me. This was someone who enjoyed the power she held over our family. The last recording entry made my blood freeze. March 12th. Sarah cornered me today and asked directly what I was doing, where I'd been going, who I'd been talking to. She knows I'm onto her. She tried to make it sound casual, like she was worried about my grief affecting my judgment. but I could see the panic in her eyes. She's scared I'm going to expose her before she finishes whatever she's planning. There was a long pause in the recording, then Marcus's voice continued, quieter now. If something happens to me, if I have an accident or suddenly get sick, it won't be coincidental. Sarah is smart and patient, but she's also ruthless. She's been planning Mom's death for months, maybe years. She won't hesitate to eliminate anyone who threatens her plan. Dad, if you're listening to this, please don't trust her. Don't let her convince you that you need her help. And whatever you do, don't let her handle any of your medical care or finances. The recording ended there. 2 days later, Marcus was dead. I sat in the darkness of the garage, holding the evidence my son had gathered before Sarah murdered him. The weight of my own blindness was crushing. For 2 years, I'd grieved for Helen and felt grateful to Sarah for being such a devoted daughter-in-law. I'd let her comfort me, handle funeral arrangements, manage practical matters. I'd even started to think of her as the daughter I'd never had. She'd been planning to kill me too. The pattern was clear now. Sarah had researched our family, identified Helen as the vulnerable target with both money and medical conditions that could be exploited. She'd maneuvered herself into a caregiver role, isolated Helen from her actual medical team, and slowly poisoned her while documenting a false narrative of declining health. When Marcus got suspicious, she'd eliminated him and made it look like an accident. Now she was positioning herself to inherit everything, not just through Marcus's death, but by becoming my trusted companion in my old age. She'd already suggested I might be more comfortable in a retirement facility. How long before I started having health issues that required her assistance? My phone rang, making me jump. Sarah's name on the screen made my stomach clench, but I forced myself to answer normally. Albert, I hope I'm not calling too late, but I'm worried about you. You seemed so distracted this afternoon, and I found some pills in your driveway after we left. Did you drop your medication? Pills in my driveway. I hadn't dropped anything. Was she already beginning to plant evidence that I was becoming forgetful, potentially dangerous to myself? No, I don't think those were mine, I said carefully. Oh, that's concerning. Maybe someone else dropped them, but they looked like heart medication. You know how important it is to take your pills regularly, especially with all this stress. Maybe I should come by tomorrow and help you organize your medications. Sometimes when we're grieving, it's easy to get confused about dosages and timing. There it was, the same gentle, caring tone she'd used with Helen. The suggestion that I might be getting confused, that I needed her help to manage something as basic as taking my own medication. She was already starting the process that would end with my death. That's very thoughtful, Sarah, but I'm managing fine. Of course you are. You're such a strong man, Albert. But even strong men need support sometimes. Helen used to worry about you, you know. She made me promise to look after you if anything ever happened to her. The lie was delivered with such sincerity that if I hadn't known the truth, I would have been touched by her devotion. Helen had never made any such promise. Helen had been terrified of Sarah in her final days, trying to warn me about something I was too blind to see. Sarah, can I ask you something? That night Helen died. You said she seemed peaceful. Can you tell me more about her final hours? There was a slight pause. Oh, Albert, are you sure you want to hear the details? It might be painful. I need to know. I've been having dreams about her, wondering if she suffered. Well, if you're certain. Sarah's voice took on a gentle, practiced tone. Helen had been having a difficult day. She was confused, agitated, saying things that didn't make sense. She kept asking for you, but I thought it would be too upsetting for you to see her like that. I stayed with her, held her hand, kept her comfortable. What kind of things was she saying? Oh, you know how the medication affected her mind toward the end? She was convinced someone was trying to hurt her, that her pills were the wrong color, that she couldn't trust anyone. The paranoia was heartbreaking, but I kept reassuring her, telling her she was safe, that everyone loved her. Helen hadn't been paranoid. She'd been trying to save her own life, and Sarah had been there to make sure she couldn't. The image of my wife, frightened and helpless, begging for help that never came, made me want to scream. Did she ask for me specifically? Constantly. But Albert, she wasn't really herself anymore. She might have been frightened if you'd seen her in that condition. I thought it was kinder to let her remember you the way you were during your good times together. Another lie. Sarah had kept me away so Helen couldn't tell me what was really happening. She'd isolated Helen completely in her final hours, making sure there were no witnesses to whatever she'd done to end Helen's life. I kept talking to her about happy memories, Sarah continued. Your wedding day, when the children were born, family vacations. I think it comforted her. And then, very peacefully, she just slipped away. There was no pain, no struggle. It was almost beautiful in a way. I closed my eyes, fighting back tears of rage and grief. Thank you for being there for her, and for telling me. Of course, family takes care of family. That's what Helen would have wanted. After hanging up, I sat alone with Marcus's evidence and the full weight of what Sarah had done. She'd killed my wife slowly, methodically, while I thanked her for her kindness. She'd murdered my son when he threatened to expose her. And now she was positioning herself to kill me too, probably within the next few months. The twins would inherit everything, with Sarah as their guardian and trustee. She'd have access to Helen's life insurance, my retirement savings, the house, everything, and 2 young children whose father had died mysteriously and whose step-grandmother was their only remaining family. I thought about Emma and Jake, innocent and grieving, completely dependent on the woman who had destroyed their family. What would happen to them once Sarah had everything she wanted? Would they suffer accidents too, once they were old enough to ask inconvenient questions? The realization that Sarah might eventually harm those children filled me with a cold fury that burned away my fear. I might be a foolish old man who had let his family be destroyed, but I wasn't going to let her hurt Emma and Jake. It was time to stop being a victim. It was time to fight back. Detective Martinez listened to Marcus's recordings with the kind of focused intensity that told me she believed every word. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. When I'd called the police that morning, I'd been terrified they wouldn't take an old man's suspicions seriously. But Martinez treated Marcus's evidence like the roadmap to a murder case it was. Mr. Thompson, this is substantial evidence, but we need more to make arrests, she said, carefully placing the recorder back in its box. Sarah has been planning this for years. She's going to have explanations for everything, documentation to support her story. We need to catch her in the act. What do you mean? I mean, we need you to play along. Let her think her plan is working. If she believes you're starting to decline mentally or physically, she might accelerate her timeline and make mistakes. The idea of pretending to trust Sarah while she tried to kill me was terrifying, but I knew Martinez was right. Sarah was too careful, too prepared for accusations. She'd have medical records, witness statements, a complete narrative that painted her as the devoted caregiver and me as a confused old man making wild allegations. What exactly are you asking me to do? Let her help you with your medication, but we'll replace your actual pills with harmless substitutes that look identical. Everything she gives you will be documented and tested. If she's adding anything to your medication or substituting different drugs, we'll have concrete proof. Martinez explained the plan in detail. I would wear a wire during conversations with Sarah. Cameras would be installed in my house to record anything she did when I wasn't watching. Most importantly, I had to act vulnerable, confused, like I was beginning to decline the way Helen had. The hardest part will be acting grateful for her help, Martinez warned. You'll have to let her believe she's successfully manipulating you while we gather evidence. Can you do that? I thought about Helen's terrified face in those final days, about Marcus dying alone in his car, about Emma and Jake losing everyone who truly loved them. Yes, I can do that. That afternoon, I called Sarah and asked for her help organizing my medications. I made my voice sound tired, uncertain, like I was admitting a weakness I'd been hiding. I think you were right about me getting confused, I told her. I found some pills scattered on the kitchen floor this morning, and I can't remember if I took my heart medication yesterday. Maybe I do need help keeping track of everything. Oh, Albert, I'm so glad you called. I've been worried sick about you. I'll be right over. She arrived within 20 minutes, carrying a large bag and wearing the expression of loving concern that had fooled me for so long. But now, knowing what she really was, I could see the calculation behind her sympathy. Don't be embarrassed about this, she said, unpacking pill organizers and notebooks from her bag. Memory issues are completely normal at your age, especially with all the stress you've been under. The important thing is recognizing when you need support. I watched her work, separating my medications into daily compartments, making notes about dosages and timing. She was thorough, professional, exactly what you'd want in a caregiver. The wire taped to my chest felt heavy as a stone. I brought some additional supplements that might help with your energy and mental clarity, she said, pulling out bottles I didn't recognize. My friend Janet's father had similar issues, and these made a real difference for him. Supplements, just like the medicine she'd given Helen. I forced myself to nod gratefully while she explained how the new pills would help with my confusion and fatigue. Everything she said was perfectly reasonable, delivered with genuine-seeming care. Sarah, I want you to know how much I appreciate everything you've done for our family. I don't know what I would have done without you these past 2 years. Her smile was radiant. You're like a father to me, Albert. After my own parents died, you and Helen welcomed me into your family completely. Taking care of you isn't a burden. It's a privilege. The lies rolled off her tongue so smoothly I almost believed them myself. She'd never mentioned dead parents before. Was that even true? Or just another manipulation designed to make me feel sorry for her? I've been thinking about what you said about the retirement community. I continued, hating every word. Maybe you're right. This house is too big for me now, and I worry about managing everything alone. Oh, Albert, I think that would be wonderful for you. There's a lovely place about 20 minutes from here, Sunset Manor. They have excellent medical staff, activities, people your own age to socialize with. And I could visit regularly, make sure you're settling in well. Sunset Manor, where she could control my medications without interference, where my declining health wouldn't raise suspicions, where I could die peacefully of natural causes with no one to question the circumstances. Over the next week, I played my part perfectly. I called Sarah when I couldn't remember whether I'd taken my pills. I mentioned feeling dizzy and confused. I let her find me sitting in Helen's chair, staring at nothing, looking lost and helpless. She responded exactly as Martinez had predicted. The supplements increased in number and frequency. She started staying overnight occasionally, claiming she was worried about leaving me alone. She brought brochures for Sunset Manor and scheduled a tour just to look around. Most disturbing was how she began treating me like a child. She spoke more slowly, repeated things unnecessarily, made decisions without consulting me. She was conditioning me to accept dependency, the same way she'd conditioned Helen.
Albert, I found these pills scattered on the bathroom floor,
she said one morning, showing me capsules I'd never seen before.
You must have dropped them. It's so important to be more careful. These are your heart medications.
They weren't my heart medications. Martinez had already confirmed that the pills Sarah was giving me contained sedatives and other drugs designed to cause confusion and weakness. But I nodded apologetically and let her lecture me about being more careful with my medication. The cameras Martinez had installed captured everything. Sarah going through my personal papers when she thought I was napping. Sarah making phone calls about my declining condition to people I'd never heard of. Sarah researching my financial accounts on her laptop while sitting at my kitchen table. Most chilling was a conversation she had on the phone while I was supposedly asleep upstairs. The camera in the living room recorded her side of the conversation clearly. He's deteriorating faster than expected, she said, her voice completely different from the gentle tone she used with me. The confusion is getting worse and he's having trouble managing basic tasks. I think we can accelerate the timeline. There was a pause while the person on the other end responded. No, he doesn't suspect anything. He's grateful for the help. He actually asked me about Sunset Manor yesterday. I think he's ready to make the move. Another pause. The will is already updated. Everything goes to the grandchildren with me as trustee until they're adults. Once he's in the facility, it should only take a few months. Natural causes, gradual decline, very sad, but not unexpected at his age. A few months. She was planning to kill me within a few months of moving me to Sunset Manor. The casual way she discussed my murder, like it was a minor inconvenience to be managed, made my blood run cold. The final piece of evidence came when Sarah thought I was having a particularly bad episode. She'd given me double the usual dose of her supplements, and I was pretending to be barely conscious, slumped in my chair with my eyes half closed. She pulled out her phone and called someone. It's me. I think he's having some kind of reaction to the medication. He's barely responsive. Her voice was excited, not worried. Should I call an ambulance or wait and see what happens? She was hoping I would die right there, that the drug she'd given me would cause a heart attack or stroke that would end everything without the need for Sunset Manor. When I didn't obligingly die, she seemed almost disappointed. No, he's stabilizing. False alarm, but it shows how fragile he's becoming. We definitely need to move forward with the facility placement. That night, after Sarah left, I met with Detective Martinez to review the evidence we'd gathered. The recordings, the drug tests, the surveillance footage. It was more than enough to prove what Sarah had done to Helen and Marcus, and what she was planning to do to me. We're ready to move, Martinez said. Tomorrow morning, we'll arrest her at her house. We'll also have Child Protective Services ready to take custody of the twins temporarily until we can arrange for other family members to care for them. I thought about Emma and Jake, who would wake up tomorrow to find their mother arrested for murder. They'd lost their father, their grandmother, and now they were about to lose the only parent they had left, even if that parent was a killer. What will happen to them? We'll find appropriate placement. Do you have other family members who could take them? I did. Helen's sister lived in Oregon, had always been good with children. She'd take Emma and Jake, give them the loving home they deserved. But they would grow up knowing their mother had murdered their father and grandmother. They would carry that burden for the rest of their lives. Detective, I need to ask you something. When you arrest Sarah, will the twins be there? Probably. We're planning to execute the warrant early, before they leave for school. I closed my eyes, imagining their confusion and terror as police officers handcuffed their mother and took her away. Is there any way to arrest her somewhere else? The children don't need to see that. Martinez considered this. We could arrange for her to meet you somewhere public tomorrow morning. A restaurant, maybe, or a park. Once she's away from the house, we could move in. I'll call her tonight. Tell her I want to discuss the Sunset Manor arrangements over breakfast. She'll come running. She thinks she's finally getting what she wants. As I drove home to make that call, I felt a strange mixture of anticipation and dread. Tomorrow, Sarah would pay for what she'd done to my family. But justice wouldn't bring Helen and Marcus back. It wouldn't erase the years of manipulation and lies. It wouldn't heal the damage done to those innocent children. Still, it was something. After months of being Sarah's victim, I was finally taking control. Helen and Marcus would have justice, and Emma and Jake would be safe from the woman who had destroyed their family while pretending to love them. I picked up the phone to call Sarah, my hand steady for the first time in weeks. Sarah arrived at Maple Street Diner exactly on time, carrying a folder full of Sunset Manor paperwork and wearing her most caring smile. She slid into the booth across from me, already talking about room options and medical care coordination. She had no idea that Detective Martinez and 3 other officers were positioned around the restaurant, waiting for my signal. I'm so proud of you for making this decision, Albert, she said, spreading brochures across the table. This is going to be wonderful for you. You'll have round-the-clock medical support, social activities, and I'll be able to visit regularly to make sure you're adjusting well. I nodded, playing my part one last time. I've been thinking about what you said, about not being a burden to family. Helen wouldn't want me struggling alone. Exactly. Helen would want you to be safe and comfortable. And the twins need to see that responsible decisions are being made for their grandfather. It sets a good example for them about taking care of elderly family members. The casual way she mentioned Emma and Jake made my stomach clench. Those children were still part of her long-term plan somehow. Maybe inheritance wasn't her only motivation. Maybe she needed guardianship of Helen's grandchildren to maintain her image as the devoted family caretaker. Sarah, before we sign anything, I need to ask you something that's been bothering me. Her expression didn't change, but I caught a brief flicker in her eyes. Of course, what is it? The night Helen died, you said she seemed peaceful, but I keep thinking about something she told me a few days before that. She said she was scared, that something was wrong with her medication. Did she ever mention that to you? Sarah's smile never wavered. Oh, Albert, Helen said so many confused things toward the end. The medication affected her mind, made her paranoid and frightened. She was convinced people were trying to hurt her, that her pills were poison, all sorts of heartbreaking delusions. I tried to reassure her, but when someone's mind is going, logic doesn't help much. But what if she wasn't confused? What if something really was wrong? For just a moment, Sarah's mask slipped. Her eyes went cold, calculating, before the concerned expression returned. Albert, I know this is hard to accept, but Helen's mind was failing. The paranoia, the accusations, the fear, those were symptoms of her condition. I have all the medical records if you want to review them again. I'd like that. Maybe it would help me understand what happened. Of course, though I should warn you, some of the details might be upsetting. Helen said some very harsh things about me toward the end, accused me of terrible things. I know she didn't mean them, but they were painful to hear. Helen's accusations hadn't been delusions. They'd been desperate attempts to save her own life. But Sarah was still trying to discredit my wife's final words, to make sure I dismissed anything Helen might have told me. What kind of things did she say? Sarah hesitated, as if reluctant to repeat hurtful words. She claimed I was giving her the wrong medications, that I was trying to poison her. She even said I was stealing money from your accounts. It was heartbreaking because I loved her so much and the disease made her see me as an enemy. Every word was a confession delivered as a denial. Sarah was telling me exactly what she'd done while portraying herself as the innocent victim of Helen's deteriorating mind. That must have been very difficult for you. It was. But I understood it wasn't really Helen talking. It was the illness. That's why I never mentioned these episodes to you or Marcus. You were already suffering enough without hearing your wife's confused accusations against someone who was trying to help her. Marcus, she'd just admitted that she'd hidden Helen's pleas for help from her own son. She'd isolated Helen so completely that even her children didn't know she was begging for rescue. I reached into my jacket and touched the small device Detective Martinez had given me, the signal that would bring the officers rushing in. But I needed one more piece of the puzzle. Sarah, I have to ask about Marcus too. His death was so sudden, so unexpected. Did he ever mention being worried about anything? Problems at work, financial stress, anything that might explain why he was driving so recklessly that night? Her expression grew genuinely sad. Marcus was struggling, Albert. He'd been asking a lot of questions about Helen's death, second-guessing the medical care she received. He was consumed with guilt about not being more involved in her treatment. I think he blamed himself for letting me handle everything. What kind of questions? He wanted to see Helen's medical records, wanted to talk to her doctors, kept asking about the medications she was taking. He couldn't accept that sometimes people just die, even with good medical care. The guilt was eating him alive. She paused, dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. The night before the accident, he called me very upset. He said he'd been investigating Helen's death, that he thought something wasn't right about her treatment. He was talking about going to the police with his suspicions. I tried to calm him down, told him grief was affecting his judgment, but he wouldn't listen. A chill went down my spine. She was admitting that Marcus had called her the night before he died, that he'd threatened to expose her. She was practically confessing to his murder while pretending to grieve for him. Do you think his emotional state might have contributed to the accident? I think he was distracted, obsessed with conspiracy theories about his mother's death instead of focusing on healing and moving forward. It's tragic, but when someone's mind is consumed with paranoid thoughts, they're not safe to be driving or making rational decisions. There it was, Sarah's explanation for why Marcus had died. He'd been mentally unstable, obsessed with false theories, unable to think clearly. If anyone investigated his death more thoroughly, she had a complete narrative ready to explain his behavior. I looked across the table at this woman who had systematically destroyed my family while convincing me she was saving it. She'd murdered my wife slowly, methodically, while I thanked her for her devotion. She'd killed my son when he threatened to expose her, and now she was planning to murder me while positioning herself to control my grandchildren's inheritance. The most chilling part was how convinced she seemed of her own righteousness. In her mind, she wasn't a killer. She was a problem solver. Helen had been suffering, so she'd ended that suffering. Marcus had been a threat, so she'd eliminated him. I was a burden, so she was arranging for me to die peacefully in a facility where my decline would seem natural. Sarah, there's something I need to tell you, I said, my voice steady despite the fury burning in my chest. What is it, Albert? I know what you did to Helen. I know what you did to Marcus. And I know what you're planning to do to me. Her expression didn't change for several seconds. Then, slowly, the concerned smile faded, replaced by something cold and reptilian. Albert, you're having another episode. The stress and medication are affecting your judgment again. You're saying things that don't make sense. I found Marcus's recording equipment. I have evidence of everything you've done. Her eyes darted around the restaurant, probably looking for escape routes or witnesses, but her voice remained calm, patronizing. Sweetheart, there is no recording equipment. Marcus didn't leave any evidence because there was nothing to record. You're having paranoid delusions, just like Helen did toward the end. She was still trying to gaslight me, to convince me that reality was a product of my failing mind. But I was done being manipulated. I pressed the signal device. Within seconds, Detective Martinez and 3 officers converged on our booth. Sarah's face went white as Martinez showed her badge and spoke the words that ended her reign of terror. Sarah Thompson, you're under arrest for the murders of Helen Thompson and Marcus Thompson, and for the attempted murder of Albert Thompson. As they read her rights, Sarah's composure finally cracked. She looked directly at me, her mask falling away completely to reveal the cold predator underneath.
You foolish old man, she hissed. Do you have any idea what you've just done to those children? Emma and Jake will grow up knowing their mother is in prison because of you.
You've destroyed their lives. Even in handcuffs, she was trying to manipulate me, to make me feel guilty for stopping her. But I thought about Helen's terrified face in those final days, about Marcus dying alone because he'd discovered the truth, about Emma and Jake growing up under the influence of their father's killer. I've saved their lives, I said quietly, just like I should have saved Helen's and Marcus's. As they led Sarah away, she called back to me one last time. Those children will never forgive you for this. You'll die alone, and they'll remember you as the man who took their mother away. But Emma and Jake wouldn't remember me that way, because they were never going to know the whole truth. Helen's sister Margaret had agreed to take them in, to raise them with love and stability. They would grow up believing their mother had made mistakes that landed her in prison. But they would never know she was a killer. That burden would die with me. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.